This is the Mashpee Board of Health meeting, and Mashpee Town Hall, Court Meeting Room, 16 Great Neck Road North, Tuesday, September 19th, 2023 at 4:30 PM. My name is Ernie Virgilio, I'm the chairman,
Ed Reposa, present, clerk.
Zachary, our agent. First order of business here, Zach will be in a couple more minutes, I believe.
4:35, but let me just talk with them. It's Zach Seaberg, can you guys hear me?
Hello there, yes, I do, I hear you.
All right, so we don't have you, this on the agenda until 5 o'clock. I sent the email to Craig.
Okay,
Yeah, to Gary, so, I'm just gonna put my camera on mute, well, my microphone on mute, and my camera on, off, and then I'll open back up once we're ready to go.
so I just leave it sort of open then and then?
Yeah, I told the people coming onto your Zoom that it's at 5 o'clock, but if they wanted to come on and ask you any specific questions for their town, because I sent it to the health agents through all of Cape Cod, and I sent it to all the engineers that we have on our list. I told them that if they had any special questions, if you wanted to, you could answer them. If you don't want to answer any of them, don't.
Okay, but then I'll do the actual presentation at 5 then.
Yeah.
Got it.
All right, thank you.
Good. So is Larry there? Connecting to audio.
Guess I can't get rid of them completely.
Ask him to mute himself, Zach.
I'm just gonna put my computer on mute. If you want to do
Just gonna
the
knock
approval
off a
of
couple-
minutes,
yeah.
do you want to just do the?
I'm gonna
approval?
knock off a few things.
Okay.
Review and approval of express warrants. We have none.
No expense, no expense warrants.
Review and approval of meeting minutes, September 5th,
Hi
2023.
Dan, how you doing?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of September 5th, 2023.
Fine. Well, I know there are
I have a
a
motion.
lot of folks joining us today,
second it,
so
I'll second it.
I'm not sure how it works.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Yeah, not either.
Okay. Variance objective. I think we could probably take number 7.
Yeah, if you want, we can discuss changing the meeting day to Wednesdays.
Correct.
So we run into a conflict of interest, as you can see our wall here, on Tuesdays at 4:30 and 5. I'm just proposing that we move it to 4:30 on Wednesdays, the first and third Wednesday of the month. There's no conflict of interest in this room, so we'd be able to have the whole Wukoy in room without the wall separation, so we can fit more than one row of people. If you want, you can vote yes or no, and whatever you decide, and then once we get the final answer from John through email, if his is a yes and agrees with everybody, then next meeting will be on Wednesday.
I personally think it's a great idea because we've had enough
Yeah.
problems with this new screen and
Yeah.
the big, whatever they want to call it. But anyway, I think I'd like to make a motion if we could.
Okay, I'll make a motion to have the meetings on Wednesday at 4:30, and subject to informing John Livingston.
Right. You want to wait for John, or would you, I think we could vote on it. Yeah, I say, I'm going to second the motion.
Okay.
Okay,
All in favor?
all in favor, yeah? Aye.
Aye.
And if he has a conflict with it, then what we'll do is we'll just make the next meeting on the same time, day that we have right now, already on schedule, and go from that point to see if he can do any other times.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, it is time for
4:35.
100 Great Neck Road.
Okay, being 4:35 PM, show cause hearing, review and compliance of septic upgrade, 100 Great Neck Road North, 1, Marshall.
So we had a call for 100 Great Neck Road the other day. Well, August 30th of this summer, 2023, that one of the cesspools had overflowed and was into the parking lot. By the time my inspectors, Christine Willender and Joe Callahan, got out there, they had already contacted a company to come pump it. The system was required to be upgraded, and the system was approved through the Board of Health for a new system to go in back in May 19th of 2022. And under the conditions that they keep pumping the cesspools until it is upgraded. This overflow is subject because it's not showing the good faith effort of keeping the environment safe according to the agreements. So they're here to give us an update on what's going on with the upgrade of the septic system, which has been going on for a few years.
Good afternoon. Robert Mills. I represent the owner of the property, Juan Marichal, who's to my right. Zach, do you want us to discuss first the overflow situation on August 30th, or you just want to hear a general overview of what the status is of upgrading the system?
You can give a little brief explanation of the overflow, and then we'll just go into what the status is.
Okay.
Because
So-
we've already taken care of the order and everything.
Yeah. So the overflow related to the cesspools that service the laundromat and the office building. And what had happened, and the systems, by the way, the cesspools are checked as per our agreement with the Board of Health. The cesspools are checked on a daily basis. And if they're 75% full, Ready Rooters on the ready, so to speak, to come and pump them, and they do that. And we have all the records here, and quite frankly, the Board of Health should have those records, because when the pumping occurs, I believe the pumper is required to file those records with the Board of Health. So we have those records. That's been ongoing on a regular basis, anytime those cesspools are 75% or greater filled. This particular occasion, apparently there was toilet paper stuck in the toilet in the office, and that's the one that services that one that was overflowing. And so the water was running constantly, and that was the cause of the overflow on that particular day. The gentleman that lives here and sort of does the day-to-day checking was under the misimpression that there was a broken pipe. There wasn't a broken pipe. It was simply a clogged toilet. And I think that was taken care of on that day, if I'm not mistaken. So that's that issue. But we have pumped regularly. Anytime there's been, like I said, anytime the cesspools have been 75% or greater in fill capacity, they've been pumped by Ready Rooter. And again, we have those records. You should have those records. If you don't, we can just make copies of what we have and provide them to you. Or Ready Rooter can provide them directly, since they did the pumping. Going back historically, Juan's owned the property now. How many years you've had the property?
About 3 years and a half. 4
About
years.
3.5 years now. So this board knows, I mean, that place was a mess when he walked into it. And measures have been taken to upgrade the property in general, the apartments and the cesspools themselves. He initially applied for a groundwater discharge permit, which is required for 10,000 gallons or greater, but no more than 15,000 gallons. And we got that. We got that from the DEP back in 2021. I think this predates your arrival, Zach. And that was approved by DEP, and then it was appealed by the Board of Health. Board of Health felt at that time that a conventional Title V system, although it was approved by DEP, was inadequate because of its proximity to the Mashpee River and the inability of a conventional system to perhaps reduce nitrogen as much as the board would like to see. So we had that approval. We had a loan in place. It was a $300,000 cost to install it. We had a loan in place from Barnstable County to install that system, and once the appeal came, that came to a halt. Both DEP and I were of the position at that, and this is a little bit of a moot situation, but I think it's important to say that both DEP and I were of the position that the town did not have standing to appeal, because there's only two provisions under Title V, under the Code of Massachusetts regulations, where a person can appeal a decision by a DEP for a groundwater discharge permit. We didn't feel that the town was one of those persons qualified. Irrespective of that, we came to an agreement. DEP and Juan and the Board of Health came to an agreement for an alternative system, which we had designed. So he got a loan to design the first system and also the second system, total loans of about $85,000 in engineering. And that second system has now been approved. Juan went back to get a loan from Barnstable County for the installation of this second system. This second system now cost about $600,000 more than the initial system, so it's about a $900,000 system. Barnstable County will now not give us a loan for the alternative system for a couple of reasons. First, they felt that it would be a 25-year loan, and they felt that the alternative system might be obsolete within a couple of years, and so they weren't willing to fund that kind of money on a 25-year amortization for a system that may be obsolete in a couple of years. This board's aware that there's regulations and changes upcoming, I think, from Barnstable County that may require most people in nitrogen-sensitive areas to upgrade their systems to meet the requirements that are in effect at that time. So, and I think it was going to be about they thought within 7 years, excuse me, I may have misspoke, so.
2 to 7 years.
Yeah, 2 to 7 years, excuse me, that it might become obsolete. So even take the worst case, or the best case scenario where it might be 7 years, expending that kind of money, $900,000 for a temporary fix, perhaps is not in anybody's best interest. The ideal situation, obviously, is for us to connect the sewer, which is what we're dying to do. Of course, we have to wait until time is right to do that. In the meantime, we thought that other measures could be taken to alleviate the current situation, and some of the things that have been suggested to us by, one was by, he's an installer, he's not an engineer, but he's an installer, he's out in the field every day, is Michael Leary, suggested that we put in 2 additional leaching facilities, primarily to service that area that overflowed a few weeks ago, which is where the laundry is. And that would probably alleviate the situation, at least on a temporary basis for the foreseeable future until we can come up with some alternative or come up with something that would meet the changing regulations without spending $900,000 for a temporary fix. So that's kind of where we are. I guess what the message I want to convey is that we have complied with our agreement with the town to pump when necessary the cesspools. They are inspected on a daily basis. We have Ready Rooter on contract to show up and pump when it's needed. Did make efforts to try to install that alternative system that the Board of Health wanted to see installed. Ran into roadblocks with financing with Barnstable County, who refuses to finance it at this point in time, based upon what's in the air for changes. So,
Have you looked at any other options for financing besides Barnstable County, which is mainly for residential areas, not commercial?
Well, we have asked all the banks, but the rates are much higher. And with Barnstable County, they will do the loan. It will be a system that will be designed that will last at least 25 years. And based on the regulations that was passed through, we're not sure if that system is designed compatible with these regulations that are starting July 7 of this year.
so what he said is that the newly approved alternative design system may not be compatible with the new regulations. So what would be asked of us is to spend $900,000 for a system that may be obsolete within 2 to 7 years.
Well, when you say obsolete, what do you mean by obsolete of the system?
Well, not in conformance with the new regulations, proposed regulations.
Because I'd have to look at that, but I don't think, I think the way the new Title V regulation states that is if you have it and it is conforming now, it will be conforming in the next few years. If you have a system already in the ground, you're not going to be forced to upgrade to, it's going to be the best available at that time. So if you have the best available right now, and it's not failing in 12 years, you're not going to be required to upgrade to that 12 years from now. It's best available technology. So if you have what's out there right now with the cheapest it's ever going to be, again, with the lowest the APR rates are ever going to be, again, it would not be required to upgrade in 12 years unless it failed. And as far as sewer, according to our plans, there's no sewer going there. You're right on the top of the Mashpee River. You have, I forget how many cesspools there, just flowing into the ground on a river that we keep getting complaints about. If it's been, I've been here a year, and this is what I've heard a lot of things about, is this property. I talked to you back in December. Or January.
Yeah.
Then I've heard nothing from you since. You said you were going to get in contact with other finances. I haven't heard from you since. Now I get an overflow, because it could be because of a clogged pipe. Yes, that does happen. But the agreement was to keep it pumping because you have to maintain it. Well, in Title V, you have until 2 years. That includes with the pumping, the maintenance of the system, to have it installed. Your 2 years are almost up. That comes, so that'll be May 19th, 2024, the 2 years is up. And other than our conversation in January, I haven't seen any good faith effort put in front of me for it.
Yeah, I did spoke to the DEP after our conversation, and they did told me that we might have town sewer in the next 2 years at our location. So that's why, one of the reasons we put a pause on all this.
So does the DEP know something that the town doesn't know?
I'm not sure if I spoke to them.
Have you talked with the sewer commission here?
No.
So, because the sewer commission is who decides where the sewer is going, not the DEP.
Okay.
And according to all of our options and phases, I don't see a pipe going by you whatsoever.
Okay.
The next phases are gonna go up to, up on the other side. Can't see the map from here. But even if you were in phase 5 or option 12, whatever they're calling it now, that would be the life of a regular septic system, would be that time zone. So in all those years, you could have gotten a lower interest rate, you could have gotten the lower prices for the system going in, and you could have been helping the town clean up Mashpee River.
For all of what years you're referring to? We got our first permit in 2021.
Well, I'm saying in 2 years, since 2022, nothing's been done really, besides talking to Barnstable County and this. But I'm saying, if you're going off of thinking that you're gonna wait for sewer,
Yep.
how long till the sewer gets there, if it ever gets there?
Right. So in January, after we spoke, when we spoke with the Barnstable Finance Department, they told me this regulation was coming up, and it was going to be effective July 7. And they said that the system we had designed might not be compatible. So at that time, we stopped and wanted to see how this is going to work before we continue and spend $900,000 on the system. So he's saying that this system that we have, it is compatible with the new regulations. Then, and we're not going to have town sewer anytime soon. Then we can go ahead and start working on scheduling the septic install. We just have to get a financing.
I leave it to you two. You have any questions?
Well, I just have a comment. It's just, if it's all based, you already have an approved system, but now you gotta wait for financing, which, when? I mean,
I think you put the financing on hold, right?
Yeah, like I said, pause it, because we were ready to go in January. I spoke to Pextori Excavation, and we were going to go ahead. Then I was informed that in July 7 of this year, they were going to change the regulations. So if I would have put a system in, and then after regulations come out, it'll be, not up to code or something, we would have to change it again.
Like the regulations say, they're for the best available technology.
Okay,
We can't make a regulation go out saying, hey, 12, or 5 years from now, there's gonna be a technology that can bring every residential house down to 2 milligrams per liter. But we have this regulation right now, and none of these systems can do it, so don't put them in. The regulations state, best available technology.
Right.
And like I said, in 5 years or so, if your system's still working and the regulation changes and there's a better technology, they're not gonna come after you and say you have to upgrade because there's a new technology. We're not gonna go to every household and say, fast 1.3 is out, upgrade your septic system. That's not how the regulation works.
Okay.
So if your system failed in a couple years, then you would have to upgrade to that day's best available technology.
Okay.
And that's how the new Title V code is written. So for them to say that they won't finance it because your system won't meet the qualifications in 5 years, I don't understand why they would say that unless you're saying that I need the money now so I can install it in 5 years. And the system that you picked today, you're not gonna install for 5 years. Well, you have to, in 5 years, you have to install what's good in 5 years, not the system that you picked today.
Okay.
So if you picked a system by May, this system right here, and had that in place, unless it's a failure in 5 years, it's still gonna be good.
Well, what we can tell the board today, I guess, so I'll have to look into some of this myself with DEP and with Barnstable County, just to make sure we're on firm ground here. Maybe even talk to you, Zach, a little more about that. But in the short run, we'll continue to monitor as we have and continue to pump as we do when it's 75% at capacity. And we do have time to install the new system before we're in violation, I believe, so.
Yeah, you still have a little bit more than half a year.
Yeah.
If till May 19th,
Okay.
2024.
Yeah.
I'd like a little bit more communication, telling me where you stand.
Okay.
So that way I'm not just calling you up and saying, hey, time for you to come in front of the board.
Yeah.
And if you need more clarification, and we can talk about it, but like I said, if you're looking at the sewer, it's not scheduled to, there's no plans for sewer to go there at this point whatsoever. That's it.
I guess I'm concerned on, wouldn't we have been notified of this change? Or is it what's in place now? When the change is made, then they notify us?
The Title V regulations?
Yeah, what this gentleman's talking about.
The Title V regulations?
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about those back in June.
No, I know, but this
Oh.
July date,
Yeah, the July 7th, they went into effect July 7th of 2023. We had it in front of the board in June.
right, I recall
And
that.
so
Okay,
what the regulations are is that the new Title V regulations went into play because they designated new nitrogen-sensitive areas. Started July 7th, 2023. Enforcement for commercial areas start January 7th, 2024. And 2 years from July 7th, 2023 is when all enforcement starts for all properties, unless the town gets a watershed permit. If the town gets a watershed permit, then we have 20 years to upgrade people up to the IA, well, we have 20 years where they don't have to upgrade into the IA system because we have our nitrogen mitigation plan going, which would be the sewer, but we have to stay on top of that. But that doesn't really affect, that watershed permit doesn't really affect you because in town, we have a 300-foot buffer from a waterway where it has to be IA system. So either way, if we got the watershed permit and you upgrade your system, it still has to be an IA system.
Okay?
Okay?
We would ask one other thing of the board and you, Zach, if there is any issues over at that property, that Mr. Marichal be contacted as the point of contact?
Okay.
Yeah, better communication like that as well. Like, if you have any issues, or you can call me.
Oh, well, then we'll need to get your information.
I'll pass it to you.
And then if, instead of us getting a call and complaint about sewage pouring out, it's better if you call us and say, hey, you're gonna get complaints of my residents of the kids playing around sewage, because there's sewage coming out, instead of us having to go down there and find out through complaints.
Okay.
So, we'll stay in contact, and then we'll see you before May 19th, 2024.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Is that? Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you.
Zach, I think we'll do 71 Poopo,
No, we gotta do the Zooms at 5.
5 o'clock, so we want to hold that. Okay.
Because they're waiting for us.
With the Department of DNR here in Michigan. Yeah. So she's doing the whole report on it. She's been measuring phosphate in the water. She's been looking at its effect in these local areas where they've been, you know, because she had originally identified some of the big phosphate sources. Yeah, yeah. So that's the nice thing is when her report comes out, it'll have some validity to it. Yeah. But the visual, yeah, is remarkable. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you guys, we're here.
Oh, okay. That was Zach. Hi, Zach.
Yep, hi Greg.
How are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you in, well, I guess somewhat person.
Yeah, and Dan is up. It says Will Stoddard, but
Oh, got it. Yeah, I'm on Will's computer.
okay. Is Will going to join us as well?
He was going to try and come in, but he's down south. He's out of town right now. He was
Oh,
going to
okay.
try and come in if he could, you know, just by phone, but I don't know if he'll be able to.
Gotcha. So are we ready to roll, Zach?
We're ready to go. Can everybody hear it? Yep.
Yeah, we're good. We get started.
Okay. You want to kick it off? This is Dr. Dan Wickham. Dan is the. Oh, by the way, I'm Greg Tarrant. I'm the distributor in New England, and Dan Wickham is the inventor of the sledgehammer, CEO of our company, and has been doing this for 25 years. And we've had great success with our S46, S86, and we've recently gotten our 240. I'm sorry, our 40, and working on our 240 still down at the testing center. So Dan, I guess Dan is going to give a short history of the company a little bit, and then just basically extend what we are doing at the center. And any questions? Do we want to hold them to the end, or do you want to just field them as they come, Dan?
Maybe let me go just briefly go through the introduction first, and that way
Okay.
we can do that. Just to familiarize people with where we came from and how they sort of the technology developed. So I have I got. Let me hit share screen here, and I go in and open up
Hello, Susan.
this thing
Hi
here,
there.
and then I hit my slideshow to go there. Hopefully, slideshow from the beginning. I'm on a computer I'm not familiar with, but I can give it a shot here. So I'll just start out. Sure, I can get everything correct here.
We got the first slide.
Yeah, okay, good. We got the slide. And there we go. I have to look at where my scrolls are. What I wanted to do is just introduce a little bit my background. Part of the development of the technology comes from my background, which is a little bit odd. I started out years ago and got a master's degree in freshwater biology, limnology from Wayne State University. This is back in the early 70s. And I worked, in fact, on phosphate pollution back in those way back, as it were. And then I had an unusual opportunity to go out to California in 1972. And while I was there, I was the director of a lobster aquaculture project for UC Davis out at the Bodega Marine Laboratory. And that's really where I got involved in wastewater treatment, because I had to keep thousands of little lobsters of all different sizes alive, living literally in their toilets, so we had to be pretty good at the wastewater treatment. And I stayed that for a while, and then I enrolled at Berkeley, stayed at the Marine Laboratory, but enrolled at UC Berkeley and got my PhD in marine ecology. So I'm trained in both freshwater biology as well as marine biology. But I did kind of an unusual thing. In 1979, when I got my PhD, I was able to get a half-time grant, but it was only half-time. So I said, well, what do I do with my other half-time? Well, I had been making wine for many, many years, and so I decided to start a winery. So I had a winery for half-time, and then I was a research ecologist at the Marine Lab for the other half-time. And the winemaking was really important because it introduced me to what I would call industrial scale microbiology. It wasn't academic microbiology. It was industrial scale because we were using inocula, and we were inoculating yeast and with bacteria. And I learned that whole process of controlling those things. And at the same time, it introduced me to the whole field of fermentation. And fermentation turns out to be very, very important in what we're currently doing. But I'll start from that. In 1989, I was approached by a group who had a culture of bacteria they were using that they used for composting, and they were doing it for fertilizer production. And I started working with them, and this was right around the time of the Valdez oil spill, so there's a lot of interest in bioremediation, and they had sort of accidentally discovered that their bacterial blend would eat oil. And so what we did is we worked out a method where we developed a way to compost contaminated soil. And we would spray the bacteria in it, and what we would do is about every third or fourth bucket, when we were building these big composting windrows, we would add cow manure. And when we were adding the cow manure, it provided a refuge for the bacteria, and it also lightened the soil so it could get better air transfer and everything else. And we would turn the pile about every week, and after 8 weeks, we'd end up with beautiful topsoil. And this was a fascinating thing that worked very, very effectively. But it meant I was working with dairymen all the time. I had to go out and look for manure. And we had a dairyman in California who had been irrigating his field. He had a system where he would scrape the manure from his barn into an upper pond. The liquid went down to a lower pond, and he would irrigate with that lower pond. And what he found over time was that manure is so sticky and viscous. It's very, very, it's a difficult material to work with. Well, over time, it had clogged the soil. It had covered his soil with a mat, and it meant that every time it rained, it would run off into the creek. And he was being cited by California Fish and Game for ammonia in the creek next to his barn, in his pasture. And so he asked us, since we were using our bacteria for that purpose, he asked us if we could use the bacteria and try it in as manure. And so what we did is we started inoculating the manure lagoon, and it suddenly came to life. It just suddenly was foaming, it was bubbling, it was just going crazy. And of course, I was looking at it as a winemaker. I looked at it and said, well, I know exactly what's going on. It is fermentation. That is actually fermentation. It looked just like one of my large vats of grapes when I would ferment them. And I was fascinated by that whole thing. And what we found was that it changed the viscosity. What it did is it eliminated all that slimy characteristic, and the water became clean. And we started thinking about using this actual bacteria then as a way to eliminate that slimy characteristic of, like in septic tanks where you have leach fields get clogged, or in manure lagoon situation. But it got me thinking about bacteria in general, because one of the things I realized when I was looking at it is you have to think about where do bacteria in wastewater come from. And there are a couple different sources for wastewater bacteria. In like a manure lagoon or like the septic tank or the sewer line, most of the bacteria that goes there is coming from human intestines or from warm-blooded mammals or whatever, because it's all coming in the form of fecal bacteria. These fecal bacteria have some very, very serious constraints, however, in their biology. Number one is you can't have bacteria living inside of a living host that's going to eat a lot of food, because it's going to compete with its host and it's going to starve the host out. So you don't want an aggressive eating bacteria inside of you. Also, those bacteria are living in warm-blooded mammals, so that they have a very limited temperature range. So really, when they go down into a septic tank, they just really do very, very little. Those kind of bacteria just aren't the appropriate source of bacteria for wastewater. Now, in municipal systems or in aerobic treatment systems that have been developed, the bacteria tend to come from the bacteria that are just floating around in the atmosphere. So the bacteria that are floating around in the atmosphere are very light, and they're drawn in by the blowers that are blowing the air into these wastewater treatment systems. But when you think about those bacteria, they've got the same constraint. All of those bacteria are bacteria that are living in the open environment on top of leaves of trees and plants and everything else. And that's the source for them, and they have that same constraint. They live on a living host. So they have to be very careful not to be very aggressive, because they can't threaten the survival of the host they're actually on. And so they're just completely inappropriate to bring into a system where you want a bacteria that's very aggressive, that eats a lot of food. But actually, when you go out into the environment, the bacteria that we were using for our bioremediation came from the forest soil. So these are soil bacteria. Now, when you go out into the natural environment and you look down at your feet in the soil, what you're looking at is dead material. It's all leaves that have fallen. It's all plants or animals or whatever, but it's mostly dead material. And so those bacteria don't have that same constraint. They're free to eat, and they actually compete with each other by eating as fast as they can and growing fast. So to us, that seemed like the logical source to get our bacteria for wastewater treatment, instead of relying on the other sources that have been traditionally used. Now, when we started working on that, and when you start thinking about the bacteria that live in the forest life environment, the soil bacteria, they have several characteristics unique. One, of course, is they grow very rapidly. They have a huge appetite for carbon. I mean, they're eating billions of tons of dead leaves every year. They're cold tolerant because they've evolved in a natural environment, and their annual life cycle is such that they grow in the spring when everything's covered with snow. They're down there as spores. They're waiting for things to melt. When it starts to melt and warm up, these bacteria start to grow. But they're competing against each other. So they want to eat faster than their neighbor, and they want to get out quickly. So they'll start to eat when it's still relatively cold. So that gives them an advantage. The other thing is what they do when you think about these bacteria. The bacteria that are living up in the upper environment, among the trees and everything else, they always have oxygen available to them, so they don't have to worry about other sources. But living in the soil, it means every so often, if it suddenly rains, they get saturated. They can't get oxygen because the water just doesn't hold very much oxygen, so they use it up quickly. So what they do, though, is they can shift their metabolism over, and that's where the fermentation comes in. Because what they do is they shift over to fermentation, where they're getting their oxygen from the food they're eating. All that carbohydrate out there and all that cellulose is pretty much made into sugar. And so they shift over and they ferment the sugar, and that's how they can survive when they don't have any oxygen available. But they also have the ability, because of that, they also get oxygen from other things, like, for instance, nitrate. These are the bacteria that are the denitrifying bacteria. They can actually get oxygen from nitrate, and that makes them very, very important in that respect. But it's that life history that they have that gives them that ability. When we first started working with them, I had been working with the manure lagoons. We were doing a project at a duck farm, and what we found, we started following nitrogen, and through that, and we found dramatic reductions in the nitrogen in these ponds, these duck ponds, and when we were doing this, we weren't doing any change whatsoever to the infrastructure. We were simply growing a lot of bacteria, adding them to an existing pond system at either a duck farm or newer lagoons at the dairies, and still were finding dramatic reductions in nitrogen. And it got me thinking about it right about the time we had developed it. I started working in the city of Santa Rosa, and I was working with the Santa Rosa wastewater treatment system on forest systems. We were irrigating redwood forests, redwood groves, and I was looking at the fate of nitrogen and phosphorus in the soil under these redwood groves. And for the city, we were trying to convince the city to put in a redwood plantation instead of dumping their wastewater directly into the Russian River. And so I was trying to convince them to use this approach. At the same time, so they were doing analysis for me, and at that time we had just developed the sledgehammer technology. And of course we were using these soil bacteria, and I asked myself, I thought it was pretty interesting, we could put a sledgehammer in a home that had a mound system. And I was able to get them to do the analysis for this home at the same time, because I was thinking, well, I'm using forest floor bacteria now in the septic tank. How does it compare with what's happening out in the actual forest floor? So I was going to compare the two. And what we did was we put the sledgehammer in the septic tank. When we monitored it, at the pump tank going out to the pound, we had a very high ammonia. Ammonia was at 83. The total, TKM was up at 89. So we had a total nitrogen of 89, which was very high. I had them analyze after the water had passed through a foot of gravel and then a foot of soil, sand, in the mound. I pulled a sample. And when they analyzed, came back, the ammonia had dropped from 83 down to 0.9, so it was almost 100% reduction. And I was expecting to see a lot of nitrate, because normally that ammonia would be converted to nitrate in most systems. But in this circumstance, I didn't find any nitrate or nitrate at all. I was very shocked at how low it was. And the TKN had dropped from 89 down to 5, so it was a very, very dramatic reduction. And that was only as it passed through 2 feet, a foot of gravel and a foot of sand, which surprised me. So I went around and started looking at other systems we had put in. At the time, we weren't using the sledgehammer for nitrogen at all. We weren't even looking at it. All we were trying to do was put the sledgehammer into a tank, grow the bacteria so they could go out to the soil and they could eat away that mucus material that was clogging the soil. Because they had this ability to ferment that material. When I started looking at the systems, I would look inside of the tank. I would usually find a high level of ammonia. When I looked out in the soil, however, I would dig a hole near the leach trench and just sort of shave the soil until it started to weep through. And I would sample from that. And usually after about 6 inches of passage through the soil, I would end up with very little nitrogen. The ammonia was eliminated almost completely. And I hardly ever found any nitrate. And so it was really kind of confusing to me. I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. But what I discovered is that I did a system at a septic tank, and I purposely put in our sledgehammer system, and I operated it as an aerobic system for about 2 months. I said, okay, I want to see what happens if I don't add any bacteria to this. Will it behave just like like a normal ATU? A normal ATU, you put air in there, and over time, what happens is the ammonia starts to convert to nitrate. When I did that, I left it operating, and what I found over that first period is that my ammonia was high at first, then the ammonia dropped, but I started to see nitrate. My nitrate was climbing as my ammonia was dropping, and then I concluded that that's what normally would happen without the bacteria. When I added the bacteria, I really didn't know what to expect. I added the bacteria, our facultative bacteria, and I was expecting the ammonia to go back up again to see what I normally found in my normal tanks. But what had happened instead was the ammonia dropped at very low levels, and I still had virtually non-detectable nitrate and nitrite in the tank itself. And I finally realized that when I would put the bacteria into a tank with the sledgehammer with our facultative blend, they were so aggressive that they coated everything in the tank, and the bacteria that oxidize ammonia to NO2 and then NO3 couldn't get established. But if I let those bacteria into the system and got them growing before I put the facultative bacteria in, they could get a foothold. And when they got a foothold, then they could work together. And what we found was, in effect, what we were doing, normally you'd have ammonia going to nitrite, then to nitrate. That's the typical pattern with nitrification. But what we were finding, I actually discovered a paper that described denitrification. And I discovered that if you start with NO3, which every system out there always does, you can't really denitrify unless it's totally anaerobic. But if you start with NO2, you can get it because the bacteria gets two oxygen ions just like they do from the O2 from the atmosphere, but they don't have to break the double bond. So what I showed was you don't need to have an anaerobic environment to do the denitrification. Our bacteria simply came in, the facultative bacteria effectively replaced the bacteria that created the nitrate, and it created nitrogen gas instead. So it was kind of an unusual finding, and it's a new process. I've just had a very nice discussion with a gentleman there up in Stony Brook. We're going to be looking at it up in Suffolk County, working with him on trying to get at the real biochemistry here. But we have seen for years that we've done it. One of the things we did here in Michigan, we were looking at, let me go here. I'm going to go to here. What we finally did is we started doing systems here in Michigan where we did a lot of lakefront properties. We have lakes everywhere here in Michigan. And what we had to do was we had to monitor. So we have compliance monitoring annually on these systems. And since we're working close to lakes, they were very concerned about the nutrients. And so we monitor them. And what we found over time was, this is a collection of data for the last 15 years. I've got about 118 different samples here from 40 different systems that have been monitored over the very long time period here in Michigan. And if you look at our normal period, if I collect all of data, if I take all of the data that we've collected, including ones that we just put in this year, ones that are older, I find that our average total inorganic nitrogen is down around 19. If I take only those systems that have been operating for at least 2 years, and I collect those, the nitrogen level is about half of that. So there's a maturation process that goes on. If I sample the ones that are brand new, we have a higher level of nitrogen in them. It usually takes about a year, and they become established. And that's what we've been seeing very consistently here in Michigan for a long time now. And of course, because of that, we've done other things to reinforce that whole thing around lakes. One of the things we've done that is different here is we no longer use leach fields. What we do is when we're around the waterfront property, we use subsurface drip irrigation. And that way we take advantage of the soil denitrification we were seeing in the soil. We're also getting now the denitrification in the tank, but because we can put the water out much, much higher, so we're above the groundwater, we're only about 8 inches under the soil, and then we plant turf or whatever over that. That means that we can get very close to the soil with our systems, and we don't get any kind of migration whatsoever through that system there. And so now we do this literally everywhere we go. We do very, very, very small properties. We do old systems. We renovate them. We found that with this drip irrigation, there's so much flexibility with what you can do with it that it doesn't make sense to use leach fields anymore around these lakes. And these are just some of the things you can do with it too. The other thing is when you're reusing that wastewater, it's beautiful material. You can get gorgeous gardens. You do a lot of beautiful landscaping and everything else. So it's been an interesting thing as we've gone through this whole process. And one of the things Greg wanted me to mention also, when we were sampling, we did a project where we were looking at soil nitrate, and I didn't realize it at the time. This was done about 20 years ago. I didn't realize it at the time. We had lysimeters that we would put into the soil. We could bury them at different depths, and what they could do is they would pull a sample of the groundwater at that different depth. It's a tube with a porous tip on it that you pull a vacuum on it, and it allows the water to drip into it, and that way you can capture water from different depths. So we were looking at a conventional septic tank with a normal leach field, just a gravel trench. We compared that with an identical one next door to it that we just installed the sledgehammer in to convert it into an aerobic tank. And then we had a separate one that we did as a treatment along with the subsurface drip irrigation. And we were sampling at 6 inches and 12 inches, 24 inches below where the water first encountered the soil. And when we did that, I discovered later, I hadn't even realized it at the time we did the study because we were focused on nitrate, and we saw dramatic reductions in nitrogen. But they also had sampled for phosphate, which surprised me, but when I looked at it, I saw that under the conventional septic tank, when you have an anaerobic tank, phosphate stays in solution. And you'll see this in lakes as well. If you get an anaerobic bottom in a lake because it's got algae blooms, the phosphate comes back into the water because it dissolves, it becomes soluble again. Well, the same thing happens with a septic tank. It stays soluble and it migrates through the soil. And it migrates quite a ways, very, very little attenuation at all. But all it took was to just convert that into an aerobic system, and the migration was virtually zero. Within the first 6 inches, we had virtually nothing left. So what was happening under aerobic conditions, phosphate becomes a mineral, and it mineralizes and simply becomes part of the soil. And it does the same thing in lakes. And that's why it's so important to keep lakes aerobic, because that way it keeps the phosphates deposited down into the sediment. But it looks to me, now we haven't done a lot of this kind of research yet, and I've been looking through the literature, but I think it's really vital that people start actually doing these kind of analyses, because it may turn out to be the simplest way to control phosphate in these lakes is to convert all the systems from anaerobic to aerobic. It's quite possible that it's that simple. So these are just some of the things we've been doing now. We are testing at the Massachusetts Test Center right now, looking to, getting ready to start the NSF 245 test for nitrogen reduction. It takes time, so we're seeing some reductions there. We're not yet ready to actually initiate the test, but we should be within about a month or so. It looks like that things are trending in the right direction at this point. But it usually it's a maturation process here. And most systems, they usually find it takes anywhere from 6 months to a year really to get your denitrification going. That's where we're at with that particular thing. But my main concern, and one of the issues that I think is more important than the NSF 245, is that with any NSF system, whether it's an NSF 40 or an NSF 245, it can only be done in brand new systems. You're completely limited. NSF does not allow retrofitting. That's just not part of their whole process. So it means anybody who wants to use a 245 process has to take out the existing system and put in a brand new advanced treatment system. Now, one of the things I'm trying to look into, and this is why it's much more important to do field testing, like the tests that we've been doing here in Michigan, is that if you can achieve denitrification in an existing system with a retrofit unit, suddenly it becomes really feasible to actually attack this issue. Because right now, I don't see any way you could use something like NSF 245 to, take care of 500,000 septic tanks on Suffolk County alone. The problem is just so daunting that unless we come up with some much, much better way to do it, I just don't see it even being feasible. You certainly can't put sewers everywhere. You're talking literally trillions of dollars to do it. And that's why it's so important to me to try and get as many of our systems out in the ground in Massachusetts or in New York or in Virginia, the places where there's so much concern about these nutrients. And that's why I'm frankly much more focused on that particular end of things than I am on the NSF 245, even though the 245 is important because it's sort of the door openers to be able to do that. But that's sort of a synopsis of where we're at with nitrogen right now, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions that people have on the technology or on some of what we think we might be able to do.
All right, anybody here have any questions? From the board?
I don't have any.
No, I'm all set.
Dan, Gus, would you review again the idea that you are eliminating leach fields from waterfront properties?
Yeah, what we do is, one of the things with these waterfront properties, of course, is we're going in, a lot of times we're dealing with homes that are pre-existing, that are either in failing conditions, or there are people who want to renovate or do something with their home, and they need to bring their treatment standard up. So a lot of times that means we're right there at the shoreline.
Right.
These are properties that, they were put in there a long time ago without people thinking about the fact that it may not have been a good idea. And so it was a constraint for us. And we finally realized that when we eliminated the leach field, which of course is much deeper, we were able to move the disposal point up at least 2 to 3 feet higher than normal, which removed it from the groundwater at a much greater depth. And what it did is it puts all of the waste in the root zone of the lawn that we usually associate with. And that means all summer long, the water isn't going down, it's going up, because we're dosing it very carefully. We make sure we never saturate the soil, and it means that the grass takes that, takes the actual liquid and it's pulling it upward through transpiration. And at the same time, it's also taking advantage of all the nutrients. So we're eliminating the phosphorus and the nitrogen just through vegetative uptake. And it gives us other opportunities as well, because it gives us more flexibility of how we can shape a property, because we can run an L shape, or we can do a kidney bean shape, or we can actually use forests. We did one system on Walloon Lake that had no lawn whatsoever. They didn't have a yard, really. It was just in the woods. And we ran the drip system all the way through the forest right next to the house, and the trees loved it. And, it made it much, much better. I think it's revolutionary technology myself.
Agreed. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you comment about sandy soil? Cape Cod is particularly sandy with very little clay. Is there any difference in how those nutrients get uptaken, or whatever the word is?
Yeah, no. Actually, it turns out that we did a treatment years ago where we were treating septage, which is the stuff that the septic tank pumpers pump out of the tanks. And we were doing a project here with a local septage system, and we were working with RDEQ. And so what I did is I built a soil lysimeter, which was a tube that I filled with native soil. And this was at a quarry site, which was just pure rough sand. So it was absolutely just very, very porous sand. And when we actually looked at the phosphate levels, I'm not sure if I can see it down on the lower right is the phosphate readings. In raw septage, we had about 19 milligrams of phosphorus, and then after the sledgehammer treatment, it dropped down to about 6.3, and then after we dropped it and let it run through 2 feet of that soil, of sandy soil, it dropped it down to 0.83. So we had a dramatic reduction in that type of soil, which was very, very rough, just very porous sand. We found, and the latest thing I did recently, I did a sample. We had a home that has one of these Elgin, the Elgin systems for the wastewater. So they had a sledgehammer in their pump tank. We put the sledgehammer in their septic tank, and then I measured out of the pump tank, and we had nitrogen was quite low. Actually, we were down there, down around 10 or so. The phosphate was about 4.3 in the tank, and then I put in one of these soil lysimeters, and the Elgin system was in pure sand, so they actually brought in sand, set the Elgin disposal system on top of the sand, and then I put the soil sampler was about 6 inches below where the water went from the Elgin unit into the sand, and my phosphorus was non-detectable. It's completely, and that's within six inches in literally pure sand. And I found, and I was very surprised. What's that now?
Okay.
I think someone's just making a
Oh,
comment.
okay.
Chad, can you put yourself on mute, Chad?
Oh, sorry.
But so that's, I don't think, it doesn't appear to be that restrictive in terms of the soil type. Again, these are things that need to be looked at. We're also looking at other technologies for phosphate control as well. Like that biochar is a good example of that. We're working with a material called biochar, and we're actually using it in lakes right now for phosphate absorption to control the algae in the actual lakes. We did a project just this summer. We did one down in Silver Lake in southern Michigan, where this biochar, you can get it. It's like a charcoal material, and it sucks up phosphorus and binds it very tightly. And we actually used bags of it floating around. We were hanging them from docks, and then we were setting them right in the culverts where a lot of the phosphate was coming into the lake, and we'd set it in there to act as a filter. And we ran that, started it in June, and it took within about a month and a half, quite literally, the entire lake cleared up.
Wow.
I mean, I was a little shocked at how well it worked, frankly. I wasn't quite expecting that immediate result. And the nice thing is we have a woman, Jennifer Tremilowitz-Jones, is a PhD limnologist who has her research company down in southern Michigan, and she is conducting all the analyses, the analytical work, along with our DEQs. So they're monitoring this very, very closely. And certainly Michigan DEQ is very, very impressed with the results. So we're very active in trying to do more of that.
That's great. We're, I don't know who everybody is on here. I can see people. Some people I know, but on our pond, it's about 735 acres, and we're about to receive next spring results of a comprehensive diagnostic study.
Okay.
Where the point sources are for our phosphorus. And then just last Friday out of Hui, there was a report, another study that showed, which is the first I've heard of it, that actually nitrogen and phosphorus were required to make cyanobacteria take off. So everyone's been saying you don't need to get rid of the nitrogen in the pond, it's the phosphorus, but this study that came out Friday seems to counter that and needs some more.
That's a very, very interesting observation. However, I think they're wrong, and here's why. I did a study for the city of Santa Rosa. They were releasing their wastewater into what's called the Laguna de Santa Rosa, which is the sort of south fork of the Russian River. So it's a broad plain area, and it's a very slow-moving thing there. And they have a wonderful irrigation program during the summer. They irrigate 5,000 acres of greenbelt between the two cities, between Sebastopol and Santa Rosa. And it's mostly dairy, but they release all winter long, they release directly into the Laguna. And I was at a meeting with them one time, and they were showing me their nutrient control program, and it was all focused on nitrogen. And I said to them, what about your phosphate? And they looked at me and they said, phosphate? Why would we measure phosphate? And I'm sitting there going, how can you not be measuring phosphate? Are you kidding? And they said, well, California's different. And I'm going, no. The laws of physics don't change at the border. Come on, that's crazy. So I encouraged them to conduct a study. So I went through, collated 20 years worth of data that was taken all through that whole area, upstream and downstream of the release points and everything else, and focused in on the phosphorus. And what I found was the phosphate levels were astronomical. I mean, they were just so far, they were literally 1,000 times what you'd ever find in a lake anywhere. It was just, they were just beyond belief. And I zeroed in on it, and what I found was interesting is that the phosphate, when they leave the phosphate in there, what happens is you start out with nitrogen and phosphorus. You get green algae blooms, you get green algae growth. that depletes the nitrogen. So now all of a sudden they run out of nitrogen. And that's when they shift over to the cyanobacteria and they start dumping nitrogen in from the atmosphere. I actually was able to correlate the phosphorus with the ammonia in the water because it was being brought in as ammonia by the cyanobacteria. And that was the only actual real correlation I had, was the phosphate with the algae and with the ammonia. They had removed all the nitrate at the plant. And it was amazing, and it suggested to me that irrespective of which nutrient is an issue, the only one you can actually control is phosphorus. You can't control nitrogen because you got an atmosphere above you with 80% nitrogen in the atmosphere, and the minute you got blue-green algae, they just keep bringing it in. They're just going to keep loading it, loading it, loading it. You can remove every bit of nitrogen from your septic tank that you can. It's just going to come in through the atmosphere if you don't control the phosphate first.
Very good. Okay, great. That's helpful.
I have a question. You'd mentioned earlier about instituting this technology into existing septic systems and saying that wouldn't be possible because of some policy. Is that associated with the state of Massachusetts? I'm just wondering, like, how easy or difficult financially is this technology when it comes to existing septic systems here on Cape Cod, for instance?
Here's the issue that I see. The NSF 245, the emphasis on NSF 245 that everybody is using, forces you into new systems. So it means that you sometimes don't get an opportunity to test something that would be a retrofit because it falls outside of that NSF 40, jurisdiction in effect. And that's why what we want to do, it's more important for us to do field testing, to actually install systems in existing, install the sledgehammer in an existing system, do the monitoring actually in the field, and then use that as your justification for whether the technology is working or not. And because I just don't see it being feasible to put in a brand new system on every single home in Cape Cod, in New York, in Virginia. I mean, it's beyond, it's totally beyond our ability. There's just no way we can do it. Yeah. And I encourage other people to try and show stuff in the field. To me, that's what counts. Show stuff in the field and develop technologies. We're only one particular technology. We've had some very, very promising results, but it needs, some really thorough documentation. And I think, it's easy enough to do and you can get it in relatively quick time as well, especially when you deal with an existing system because we don't really have to do much. And my guess would be I was looking at a newspaper talking about a Massachusetts project out on Cape Cod where they commented they were looking at a community of 20,000 homes and a $3 billion sewer project. And I said, wait a second, how do you if I divide 3 billion by 20,000, what do I get? I get $180,000 a home. And I'm going, what are they talking about? How are you ever going to do anything like that? And we could probably, if there was where you do a large scale project where you don't have a lot of mobilization costs and things like that, our technology probably would be somewhere on the order of about $5,000 a home. And if we could demonstrate that would actually, make at least a significant impact on the nitrogen, it would be certainly a feasible alternative.
Right.
Dan, this is Greg. Can you please comment on the difference between the sledgehammer system and its ability to start operating and denitrifying and getting rid of all the contaminants quickly, rather than some of these larger systems that take, I think it was you or Will who told me that they are like 2, 3, 4 months before they even get going.
Yeah, it's twofold actually. We can start the treatment process and get you to an NSF 40 level of treatment within a week. Well, literally, when we did the NSF 40 testing, They give you a 3-week grace period before they start the analysis. And they asked us if we wanted that, and I said, no, start testing as soon as we put it in. Well, by the third day, we were meeting the NSF 40 standard, and we actually met it during that first week, so it cut 3 weeks off the test, saved us about $15,000. So it was worth doing, but it meant that because we're putting in the bacteria, see, every other system, and this is one of the things I've always found curious as a winemaker, it was natural for me to put bacteria, to put yeast into my process. And everybody did. You know, whether you're a baker or a brewer or anybody in the microbial industry, everybody, all these industries always selected the appropriate microorganism, cultured them, and put them into their systems. The wastewater industry is the only one that didn't. And it never made sense to me. They were literally, the wastewater industry has literally been pre-Louis Pasteur for the last 150 years. They're using just hardware. And that's why we said, no, let's look at the software. And because we put it in, that means it grows. It's you know, we're putting in multi-billion spores in a bacterial packet that's going in there, and they're dividing every 30 minutes. So within 48 hours, or 24 hours, you got 48 generations. You can't even count the number of bacteria you have. With the nitrogen, it's a little slower. We have a process because we have to get the nitrosomonas going, and that takes about 2 weeks. So what we do is we can get the nitrogen down within the first month or so, but that's not instantaneous.
So can you comment on what kind of maintenance is required, and also thinking about homes on these ponds in particular? Well, just because that's where I live, but there's a lot of people that are seasonal, so their entire systems are not used for a good portion of the year.
What we do is we have the installation done along with a maintenance contract, and the way we do that is we guarantee any of the equipment we do. We provide a lifetime guarantee on all of our equipment, and that way we won't actually activate that warranty unless people agree to have a maintenance contract with their local supplier. And that's just involves an annual visit. And usually it's a matter of, and what we do is we recommend during the maintenance contract, that's when they change the bacterial packet. And the way I designed the bacterial packet, the inoculum, is I have a packet that's like a tea bag that fits down into the sledgehammer unit. The sledgehammer unit is circulating liquid and providing air, and it just sits on the bottom of the septic tank. We have a little air pump that's outside of the tank, and you run an air line into it. So as the air is rising, it's pumping water through this little bioreactor. It's about 3 feet tall by about a foot in diameter. And as it's doing that, it's bringing food into we have a matrix inside of it where the bacteria can colonize. But what we do is we add the bacteria as a packet like a tea bag. And what it is, it's our bacterial spores. There's about 5 different species that are in there. And they're in spore form. And I blend them with compost. And the reason I do that is that compost acts as like a carrier for the bacteria. So when I set that in there, the bacteria will germinate. They will then circulate throughout the whole tank. They'll colonize the interior of the bioreactor. And then if people go away for a month or two, the bacteria can retreat back into that packet and feed off of the compost. Because compost is food for bacteria, but it's a very, very slow release food. It'll last for years. And the bacteria then can stay alive. And because they have such a short division time, that means when a homeowner comes back and starts using the system, these bacteria are up and running literally in 2 or 3 hours. You've got a full population back. So they respond. And then what we also do here in Michigan, again, we have the same issue. There's vacationers all over the place. We got nothing but lakes here in Michigan. And a lot of the people are seasonal. And what we do is we time our maintenance program with them with their visit. So they get in touch with us. They say they're coming up. They can be at the home at such and such a time. We then go do the maintenance call, get the system up and running and ready for them, and then they just come right in. And it's worked out very well here, actually, because, again, we deal with vacationers all the time.
Thank you.
What happens when the system's pumped and it's dried out? Say if they were going to pump it and not touch it for a couple days and it all dries out, does the bacteria stay dormant?
Oh, well, it's here's an interesting thing, and it's always a difficult thing to broach to people. We have a lot of our systems have been in. A lot of our systems have been in here in Michigan for up to 20 years now, and hardly any of them have ever pumped the tank. Once the sledgehammer system goes in, the need for regular pumping is pretty much eliminated. And I'm always reluctant to say you'll never have to pump your tank again, because that'll be the person who obviously something happens and they got to pump their tank. But in general, we just never have to pump these tanks. And so that problem really rarely occurs. If it did occur, it wouldn't really be an issue. I think the way I would do it, if somebody had to pull the sledgehammer out for whatever reason and had to pump the tank, then we'd just fill it back up with fresh water and put it back in. That'd be the simplest way to do it.
Okay, so the maintenance person doing the O&M agreement, when they go out for inspection, would just say, hey, if you need it pumped or not.
Yeah. The thing is, what we do is we recommend, if you ever need to pump, then obviously it should be pumped. The trick is not to automatically pump it on a particular schedule, because you just don't need to. The trick is only pump it if you need to. And in fact, you really shouldn't need to. I had a system at my house, well, in fact, at our offices here in Michigan for 20 years, that system never was pumped and there's nothing in it. It's just totally clean. So it's
That the bacteria, it reacts so fast to the food that it is introduced to, that everything is gone in the tank pretty much in 2 to 3 days, right, Dan?
Yeah, usually. Well, Greg, it's an interesting thing when people talk about pumping. In effect, we are pumping the tank all the time.
Right.
Because we are treating it, and there are still some solids in there, but the concentration of solids is so low, and most of it is just simply our bacteria anyhow. They're going to go out into the leach field, and they don't cause any problem in the leach field. They actually enhance the soil because they make it more humic and a little bit more absorbent. So we are really pumping the tank all the time. It's like we're pumping it all the time, but at such a low concentration, it just never builds up.
And I'd just like to make a comment as well. One of the questions it's asked is, the power goes out, and the system is not working for, say, a month or so. You're away or something. It really doesn't matter. You address the issue when you get back, and everything just gets started up again. And within 2 or 3 days, everything's gone in the tank again. And as Dan just mentioned, bacteria travels to the D box, out to the field, and any solids that have gone out there are remediated anyway. So
yeah, that's actually very true. In fact, I've seen systems that we have had shut off for as long as over a month, and when you look at them, they still are relatively clear. And it's because these bacteria, again, as I mentioned, the bacteria, when they run out of oxygen, they use the oxygen in the food. And so as long as you've got carbohydrate in there, you can have, you can have any sugars or any kind of vegetables or those kind of things. Those are carbohydrates. The bacteria, as long as they're there as vegetative cells, they will shift over and they'll start to ferment that material. And they can keep doing that for a pretty long time. I think, I wouldn't go much beyond about a month, but they certainly, for that first month there, they're really not really being affected at all. And if you start it back up again, they're right back again.
And Susan, to your question, normally we just would do maintenance. You change the filter in the pump. And by the way, the equipment, the sledgehammer equipment, is 100% warranted for life. The pump is 2 years, Dan, is it?
2 years, but we found that because we modified our diffuser, we developed a new diffuser for the system that has very little back pressure. We hardly ever have pumps burn out.
Right.
It used to, in the earlier models with our diffusers, which had more back pressure, we'd have to replace them, at least the diaphragm every couple of years. Since we re-engineered the diffuser, we just hardly ever have to do anything to those pumps.
Right. So we would come back as maintenance. Say that, like Dan was saying, someone's coming in June. You just start it up. You change the bag. You change the filter that is in the pump, because it sucks in air from the outside, so there's dust and things like that. And it's typically, $200 a year
Yeah.
to do the maintenance, and that's up to the local dealer who has originally installed it. They take care of all the maintenance, and there's a fee, but it's very, very simple. It takes about 45 minutes, half hour to change everything out. Plus, they check the connections on the system. There's half-inch PVC connected to some flexible with some clamps. So you check that out. Just make sure everything is running, but it's all very, very simple.
Yeah, you go out and walk, make sure the leach field's not surfacing.
Right.
We do routine things just to make sure. It's more of an inspection actually than a maintenance call.
Right.
So in addition to the maintenance that you're describing, I think Mashpee has added the testing of dissolved oxygen, TSS, and total nitrogen. Is that right, Zach?
Sorry, what was that?
In addition to the regular maintenance that you have that you've just described, as far as you get the filter and looking at the sewage effluent, I think in Mashpee they've added the requirement of testing for total nitrogen and I think dissolved oxygen and TSS. Is that correct, Zach?
We do have the testing for the nitrogen. I have to look at the, I don't have it in front of me, so I don't want to give the wrong information.
So that would be, by having that additional information, it drives up the maintenance costs. But it also provides the data that I think Dan is looking for in the field to show that by retrofitting the system, we're actually producing good results.
Yeah, and there's another aspect to it as well. There's a lot of concern. When we first started out, I was looking more at what was happening in the soil than I was in the tank. Because originally, when we started out, of course, that first year I was collecting all the data, so it meant most of the systems I was working with were relatively young, and they had not really matured in terms of their nitrogen. But I was finding dramatic reductions in the soil, and it was really that soil denitrification was more significant than what was potentially in the tank. And I think that when communities are looking at nitrogen control, of course they focus in on the tank because it's the easiest thing to measure. But they also have to realize that there is an added layer of protection in the soil that might warrant at some point, especially if you're in a community for a long enough time and you've got enough database that shows that this is the case, relax the criteria on the tank and this emphasis of trying to get down to 10 in the tank, which is very, very difficult to do, and try and relieve that a little bit by also taking in the credit for the soil. But there again, it's that you need a long-term data set to be able to really look at that.
Yeah. You need to have some mechanism to test it, like a lysimeter, right?
Yeah, which is not that difficult. You can do them on a temporary basis. I had to do one over at a place in Sonoma County one time, and I just went over with my post hole digger and dug a hole down to about 36 inches, set the lysimeter in, packed sand around it, pulled a vacuum, came back, a week later, and I had myself a sample. So I mean, it's not a difficult thing to do. It's also not very difficult to put in a little soil monitoring well around these areas. Especially in these lakes and so forth where you've got high groundwater, you're better off just digging a hole and putting a little monitoring well in it, and periodically you can actually see if it's migrating to the lake. That gives you a much better level of protection in many respects.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, it would be difficult to do it for every system that was retrofitted. You'd have to have a site that was designated as sort of a testing site, as opposed to putting that burden on the resident. You know what I mean?
Oh, no, that's absolutely true. And I mean, the thing about it is that research always, you can never do everything at once, obviously.
Right.
What you try and do is you get representative samples, you get representative systems that you can go out and do sampling, because most biological processes work anywhere you put them.
Yeah.
So, sorry to cut you off, but, we do have to, end this. I have more things on the agenda for the meeting tonight.
Okay.
So if you want to take two more questions.
That's very good. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and let me just get out of this share here. I go back to my screen. There we go.
Well, I thank you for coming to our meeting. I'm going to share, if you don't mind, your information and Greg's information with the other people on the Zoom, if they have any questions, and share it with our conservation department for any further questions that they have. And I appreciate you coming to our new initiative of having septic install IA systems come and explain their products.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.
With that, if, before we continue, does anybody need a 5-minute break? Otherwise, I'll just continue. Okay, seeing that. We're gonna move on to 71 Hoople Road, Zach.
Okay, 71 Hoople. Come on up. So on behalf of Jean Cornish, a variance for 71 Hoople has been sent in because she is selling the house and has an existing cesspool, and they would like a variance from the existing cesspool regulations that the cesspool has to be upgraded before sale of property. So why they are here is to ask for the variance and to have an enforceable agreement between the purchaser and the seller that the system would be installed in a certain amount of time. If you want to state your name and who you're for, and go from there.
I'm Paula Hennessy. I represent Jean Cornish.
Stephen Kerr, representing myself, the buyer.
Okay, so Ms. Cornish had sent in a letter requesting that for the variance with an enforceable agreement with the purchaser, we put into place to have a IA system completed by May 15th, 2024. Is that still what we're looking for?
Yep.
Okay. Ed, while we look this over, I'm good with this, and I believe we have a motion.
Okay.
Be on our last page.
I don't have any comments. I make a motion to approve the variance requested with an enforceable agreement put in place with the buyer to have completion of the system by 5/15/2024.
I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Zach, would you like that?
What I'll do is I'll write up the enforceable agreement, and I'll have it in my office, and you guys can sign it, and someone will take it down and get notarized, and it'll be in place, and then, so at that point, you'll start your process, after you purchase it, on getting the engineer, having the soil evaluated, engineer will submit their plan, the plan will be reviewed and approved, or comments will be made. You hire your installer, the installer will then sign out the permit and install the product.
I neglected to ask if there was any comments further by anyone. Hearing none. We have some motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
You have comments, Ed?
I do not, no.
Okay.
So I just have a motion to approve it
Okay, second.
according to the agreements.
So we got a second, and you agree, I agree. Proof.
Thank you.
So yeah, so I'll have that done, I hope, by tomorrow afternoon, and I'll just have it in my office, because I'll be gone for the rest of the week, and then so you guys can come down and pick it up, sign it together if you choose, and then just get it notarized and then bring it back to us.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're looking at,
138?
yeah, 138, Summersea.
Okay.
Um, Thank you.
Good evening, Glenn Harrington, representing the property and septic design for 138 Summersea Road. I represent the buyer. There is a purchase and sale on the property, and the existing system was inspected and did not pass, as it's not a IA system within 300 feet of the water body. Therefore, a septic design was prepared. The existing system comes out below the footing in the front yard, so the tank and the leaching facility are 9 feet plus below grade. And in order to remove that system and install a new system at that, they'd have to remove basically the entire front yard down to and install the tank. They'd be, 4 to 6 feet below the footing of the dwelling. So the new system that is designed picks up the line that comes out of the house, and it runs over to the driveway where the tanks can be put in at a shallower depth, and also they can be maintained because the new system is a fast 0.75 alternative septic system to a 1,000-gallon pump chamber that also houses an ultraviolet light disinfection unit and pumps up to a 3-bedroom capacity septic system with a strip out. This is a 5-bedroom dwelling, but because the fast system is being used, the general use approval allows, the remedial use approval allows a 50%, up to a 50% reduction in the size of the leaching. And we've taken advantage of that to reduce the size of the leaching, because as you can see, things are pretty tight in the front yard from the house to the way and to Summersea Road. There are 6 variances that are requested. If you'd like me to go through them, I will, but they're listed on the plan and in the cover letter.
So what Glenn is proposing is a 1,500-gallon tank with the fast set 0.75 with the UV light in the 1,000-gallon chamber, followed by a H20 D box and 2 H20 500-gallon chambers. This is, I say it every now and then, the epitome or the definition of maximum feasible compliance with a system. It's not a large lot, it's close to the water, it's the best available technology that would protect the environment. And I don't have any problems with any of the variance requests. If it wasn't for the fast system and the UV light, I would have problems with it, but.
Yeah, I noticed in number 4, you had the fast tank. I understand the 6 requirements, which look good. Is there, Is there any public comment regarding this property issue? Seeing none. I'd like to close the hearing so the board may deliberate, make a decision. No more representative input or public comment unless the chair requested. And I'll ask the health agent if you have anything further.
Nothing further.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the variance as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Glenn, how you been?
Good to see you.
So I'll do the approval and then, I've already reviewed it 5 times, so.
Okay, awesome. This goes to conservation October 5th.
Okay,
So-
good, that's plenty of time, then I'll send them a little letter with my comments on it, the approval.
Beautiful.
All right?
Thank you.
Zach, I believe you're giving the update on the tobacco regulation?
Bob Collette was supposed to.
Bob was unavailable.
All right.
Oh.
I thought you looked familiar.
Okay, and your name, please?
Hi, my name is Sarah McColgan. I'm the Director of Tobacco Control for the Massachusetts Health Officers Association.
Okay.
Bob thought that the meeting was on Zoom, I guess, and
It was this is a very odd meeting, Madam Hope.
it's all right. It's all right. Fill me in on where your board is at. It sounds like this is an introduction of,
Yeah, this is an introduction to the new amendments and recommendations
Yeah.
that were sent out. We're still on the last revision. So right now, we're just on, we know the state has the updates, but we also know that you have recommendations for additives to it.
and did Bob give you a copy of our sample regulation?
Yes.
Terrific. I thought I had my copy with me, but I grabbed the Board of Health regulations instead, so.
Nope, that's my old
No,
town.
they're looking very, very good. So, how do you want me to proceed? Do you want me to go step by step through each section, or?
Why don't you go over what the state is changing,
Sure.
and then we'll go over what your recommendations are. We're not taking any votes.
Yep.
Tonight is just an
Yeah.
informative thing for the public to understand what is coming down the road.
Sounds good. So, and the regulations that Bob provided you with, I think that there were highlights, yellow highlights are what the state has put into the new state law, which was signed by Governor Baker in 2019. Every Board of Health is required to enforce the state law. So all those new highlights pertain to anything you're doing. A lot of it is language, are policies and things that you've got in your regulations already, but the state has now put them into state law, and maybe the wording has changed a little bit, some definitions might have changed a little bit, but that's all of your yellow highlights. And then did you keep the other highlights in green? I know I was in Yarmouth last night and they changed them to gray.
Never changed anything.
Okay. The other highlights are policies that the board has discretion over. So whenever we come to a green, or if you've changed it to make it more legible, another color, then that's something that your board can decide to either leave in the draft regulation or to remove.
So the green is available to remove, yellow is permanent.
Yellow is there no matter what. And then all of the unhighlighted material is, are things that have been in the sample regulation for, probably 10 years more, most of them. So the main things that we're looking at as far as, does it make sense for me to go over some of the main highlights of the yellow and then
Yeah.
highlights
Yeah,
of the
main-
green.
Main is to go over the yellow because that's the mandatory
Right,
aspects of it,
right.
such as the new flavors that are banned. and
Exactly.
so forth.
All right, so the new law has now extended what many communities had as far as a ban on flavored products to include mint, menthol, and wintergreen. They were exempt before in many communities, but now they've been included in the new state law. So any flavored product is now banned in Massachusetts, except for in smoking bars, which you do not have. Then we've got a definition for child-resistant packaging. That's going to be coming up as far as any vape product. The liquid vape has to be in a child-resistant package so that young people can't pick it up and think, oh, this looks really neat, it's pink, I think I'll drink it, because that would obviously be toxic.
Now, when it comes to that, is that the actual nicotine delivery device, or is it the wrapping that it's in? Like when you go and, when you get like your memory card, it's in that plastic thing.
I believe that I know it's the liquid. I don't, if the device is already pre-filled with liquid, that probably has to be in a child-resistant packaging also.
Okay.
But the liquid definitely, you know, like when you go to get your medications at CVS and they make it hard for you to open it, same purpose with that. One of the other major things, aside from the state banning flavored products, is a requirement that all convenience-type stores and adult-only retail tobacco stores have to have two types of letters, documentation from the manufacturer. The store would actually obtain it from their wholesaler. So, you know, the distributor, whoever's bringing in their cigarettes, has these letters from the manufacturer already. So it's just a matter of picking up the phone, calling them and saying, hey, the Board of Health is saying that I need these letters, and they've already got them on file. The letters are of two types. One is an attestation from every manufacturer whose products they carry, that all of those products from that manufacturer in that store are not flavored. And it's got to be signed by the corporate office and everything. Then the other type of manufacturer letter that they have to have is if they sell vape products, and convenience stores only have to have this, that the vape product is 35 milligrams per milliliter or less of nicotine strength. Adult-only retail tobacco stores can have any strength on the nicotine, but convenience stores, liquor stores, things like that where you're not age-restricted to go in can only have 35 milligrams per milliliter. Along with the flavored tobacco products, the state has now banned tobacco product flavor enhancers. What that would be is anything that could be added to a tobacco product to make it flavored. So to kind of circumvent the state law. If you're in an adult-only tobacco store and you have a bottle of vanilla next to, you know, loose tobacco, that vanilla's there to obviously make it flavored. It would be considered a flavor enhancer, even though if you went into Market Basket, you go down the baking aisle and you can buy a bottle of vanilla. But there's no purpose for it to be in an adult-only retail tobacco store aside from enhancing the flavors of the products. There are a number of different types of flavor enhancers. They come in different forms, little capsules that you put into a cigarette, lot of different things. And so any of those are considered flavor enhancers, and they're now prohibited in Massachusetts. Lots of new signs from the state. Some of them are signs talking about the state law being 21 for everyone up and including electronic cigarettes. Some of them are signs pertaining to no sale of flavored tobacco products, but there's a lot of new signs, and all of your retail stores are required to have all those signs. You probably have some at the Board of Health. Bob has them. Bob goes around with them when he does inspections, and anybody who doesn't have, all of the signs that they're supposed to have, he can provide them on the spot. Let's see. Next, yellow. I've got a lot of green here. Next, yellow. I already spoke about the nicotine content. It's got to be less than 35 milligrams per milliliter, and that's a part of the new state law, and that they require documentation for that. Let me back up a little bit. In the section that asks for identification, one of the new things that the state requires is any purchaser of tobacco products has to show ID now. So those of us that are over 21 still have to show ID. Those of us that are over 50 still have to show ID, any age. It used to be that if you appeared to be under 27, you would have to show ID, but now it's any age. So it's the same as if you were going to go and buy a beer at Fenway or Foxborough or anywhere, you have to show ID. And every time you purchase the product, you have to show ID. So if you're a regular customer and you go in there every 2 or 3 days and buy a pack of cigarettes or whatever, the retailer is still required to ask you for ID every time. And the reason for that is a lot of retailers get sloppy and, they stop asking for ID. So we're trying to, kind of ingrain it in their minds that anytime anybody asks for a tobacco product, the next thing that should be said is, can I see your ID? And that way, hopefully, they're going to be more diligent in getting identification from young folks. Violations, and this if Bob's done a compliance check here in Mashpee since 2000, I'm sure he would have since 2020. And do you remember, did you have any sales to the young people?
I've only been here for almost a year.
Oh, okay.
So I off the top of my head.
Nothing that you're remembering?
Yeah.
So as of June of 2020, the state has a new fining structure, and there are probably about 16 or 17 different violations that have to be fined under the state fining structure. And the state doesn't give you, as board members, wiggle room on that. So the fines on a first violation of anything that's on the state list is $1,000. If a board will say, well, can't we just fine them $100 like we used to? And the answer is no. The state, it's a mandated fine of $1,000 the first time. So some of the things that are included in that are sale to somebody under 21, sale of flavored tobacco products, self-service displays, all sorts of other things. Now, there are situations that are on the state list that Bob will work with the vendor. Bob's very good about establishing relationships with the stores, and if somebody doesn't have a sign, the state says they should be fined $1,000 for not having a sign. There's almost nobody in Bob's position in the state that does that. What Bob would do is provide them with the sign, and tell them, you know, it's a violation of state law not to have them. You need to keep this sign up. If it comes down or you need a new one, call me up, I'll bring it over. If he has to repeatedly do that at that store, then at some point, he'll, you know, it'll be the straw that broke the camel's back, and he'll say, the next time I come in here, if you don't have your signs, I have to fine you. But, so,
But one question,
yes,
doesn't eliminate them from appealing. Am I correct?
to eliminate that
They,
is,
if they, okay, your fines are in place.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Your fine methods, thoughts, decisions are fine, except you're never gonna get rid of the appeal method. Am I correct? They're always gonna appeal. They're always gonna be
They
able to
can appeal,
Okay,
however,
so they
The-
come, I'm sorry, they come before us,
yes,
as you said,
yeah.
and you have control. But they come before us to appeal. My position's gonna be, you control it. I mean,
The state has mandated these fines. If, as a board, you don't uphold them, the state's not going to come in and shut down the Mashpee Board of Health. But you're not following the state law.
by not appealing, by not.
So the board, they can come in front of the board to appeal. It has been, it's done constantly.
Okay, yeah, that's what I mean.
But you can deny the appeal.
Right.
Just like any fine, like when we have septic fines or anything, you don't want to set the precedence that you're allowing one person to violate the
Exactly.
state. So most boards, I'd have to look at the past on this, on the Board of Health before I got here. But I can assure you that most boards stick with doing the fines, so that way people don't make the mistake a second time.
Right.
And I believe that's why it went up to $1,000, because it used to be 100, 300, and they would just pay it at the meeting and then walk out, and then they'd be in front again a year later.
Yeah.
But at $1,000 for a store that maybe gets 30 people a week or in a day to come through, $1,000 is quite a
It's a
bit.
lot of money. And to date, the only parts of the state law that people have been fined on are sale to somebody under 21 and the sale of flavored tobacco products. So that's what the fines, you know, generally, that's what's happening. I think probably the next step, and again, it's up to you folks and Bob, the next step might be to fine folks for not having those 2 required letters. But I don't know how much merchant education Bob has done here in Mashpee. I know that the retailers do know about it. They've gotten notification from the state. I'm sure that Bob has talked to them about it. At what point does that get fined? That's between you folks to decide with Bob's guidance on that. But the state is very adamant about sales to somebody under 21 and the sale of flavored products. The sale of somebody under 21, you know, that's been around for varying ages for probably 40 years, 30 years, more than 30 years, because I've been around for 30 years, and it was before my time. So, you know, so by giving a retailer $100, as Zach said, it's kind of a slap on the wrist, and that's it. And the cost of doing business, they go back out and they do it again. But the $1,000 makes them think.
Is there fine levels, or is it just $1,000 and that's
There are
it?
fine levels. So on the first violation, it's the 1,000. If that violation is a sale to a minor, then there's also a mandatory permit suspension of up to 30 consecutive business days. How you decide that is you look at your existing permit suspension, and right now on your second sale, your existing regulations say that there's going to be a permit suspension, but it doesn't say any number of days, which is very strange. I'm wondering if it was a typo or an omission or something. But let's say it said 7 days on a second sale before June 20th. Then on the first sale now, you would probably give them a permit suspension of 3 days. And that's only if it's a sale to a minor. If it's flavored products, if it's the manufacturer letters, self-service displays, anything else that's part of that state law list doesn't get a suspension on the first violation. On the second violation, the fine is $2,000. And here's where some wiggle room comes in. It also says that there may or shall be a permit suspension. So that's up to the board. If it says shall, then you have to do that every time somebody comes in front of you. If it says may, then you have wiggle room to decide, I get a permit suspension, but Zach's store doesn't. And then you have to deal with kind of uneven enforcement. All right? A lot of times stores do appeal, particularly the sale to a minor. And one thing that we remind boards is that, that the appeal can only be based on, was the procedure followed? Not, did the sale in fact happen? Because Bob is going to be sitting here with the tobacco product, like you've probably seen him do before. And the sale did in fact happen, but were the procedures violated? Was there anything strange that took place that might make the vendor not responsible for the sale? So, so that's a second violation. In the case of a third or more violations, and this is all in a 36-month period, the fine is $5,000. And shall or may have a longer permit suspension. So that's the state violations. Then there are also some local policies that you could stick with your current 100, 200, 300. And those are things like banning the sale of blunt wraps. I think you folks do that. I'd have to look in your regulations again.
Yeah, I think there was some flip-flop on that one. So.
Okay, so, but that would be a local policy, banning the sale of blunt wraps. You do currently have cigar pricing, so little thin cigars that normally would sell for like 2 for $1, 89 cents a piece that kids are gonna buy. You've had in your regulations that they cost $2.50. It prevents kids from buying them, and the retailer gets the extra money. So a violation of that would still fit under your 100, 200, 300 because it's not part of the state law. The state hasn't passed a law about that yet. Those would probably be pretty much the only ones that you might see, but there's a long list, and most of them are things that you've already passed, like if all of a sudden CVS in town started selling cigarettes, which they're not allowed to do, then you could fine them, and that's part of the local policy fines, even though it is a state law, but the state hasn't included it. So there's a whole kind of chart that says what's what, and what gets fined on the high end, what gets fined on the lower end.
I have a question on identification. Somebody comes in from another state and shows supposedly a driver's license. How does the owner, proprietor, how do they know if it's real or not and stuff like that?
We ask that people do their best in determining that. That doesn't mean that it's a perfect system. You know, other driver's licenses from other states can definitely be accepted. It's not just restricted to Massachusetts licenses. Other types of identification, like a passport or the Massachusetts issued identification card for folks who don't drive. Those types of things can be accepted. It has to be something that's issued by a governmental agency with a photograph of the bearer. And, you know, and we ask people to do their best in determining whether or not it's a valid identification. If the expiration date's already passed, it's no longer a valid ID, and the sale should not be made. One other thing about the money and the fines is when you're issuing these fines, that money gets payable to your town clerk and it stays in the town of Mashpee. It does not revert back to the state.
Okay.
So there is an option with the fines. You can't change the 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, but what you can do is make everything 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, so that you don't have two different systems. Some boards have felt that the two-system method was confusing, not only to the board staff, whoever does their tobacco control, but also to the retailers. So some boards have passed what we call a unified fining structure, where every local policy and state law gets fined at 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. So you're certainly welcome to do that. That takes care of the new state law. Do we still have time for the green or not?
Not really.
We've had a pretty long meeting here tonight.
So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna do the draft up of what we have for the regulations. And then we will, I made the mistake of putting too many things on this.
I can actually do the draft for you. It's up to you.
Yeah, well, yeah, let me go, maybe we'll get together and go over, what we have and what is in the draft, for the green, because the yellow is gonna be in there no matter what.
The yellow's going to be in there no matter what, changes in wording and new definitions and things. And then anything that you have in your current regulations, I would put in, and still keep the highlights on the green so that the board can then see
Yeah.
what they have left to make a decision on.
And then what I'll do is, what I like to do is have discussion of the finalized product
Yeah.
before we make, on a meeting separate from the meeting of the vote. So we'll have to figure out the shall
Yeah.
and may on the
Yeah,
fines.
I think you got a lot of work to work on it.
Yeah.
A lot of, you know, I think after, as you said, it'd be great. We have a preview.
Yeah,
and then
so
we can-
that's what we'll do, and then,
Right, it usually takes 2 or 3 meetings at least before a public hearing.
that's what I like to do anyways, yeah. So, all right, yeah, so I will, thank you for the update on the new,
You're welcome.
required through the state, and, you and I will be in touch,
You
I'd
going
like
to the
to thank-
MHOA conference?
of course.
I would like to thank you very much.
Excuse me?
I would like to thank you very much.
Thank you, have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I have business cards.
That's perfect, just give me the business card, I just wanna make sure that.
Do you just need one, or would everybody like one?
Well,
I'll take one.
I need one for myself.
I'm sure I have one in the Rolodex, but I'll take it. Thank you.
I don't think so. I think this is the first time I've
This,
Thank you.
been before the Mashpee board. I don't remember being
Thank
here
you.
before.
I think I've gotten it from the MHOA meetings.
Maybe, probably. Yeah. Are you going to the one next week?
No, it's a little too far for us to go, so.
Yeah.
I wrote to ask if we can have that specific topic brought down to the southeast coast of Mass. So that way, because it's hard for the Barnstable County
Yeah.
group to make it up to.
It should be interesting.
Stoughton. It really should. Thank you.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Okay, next,
Yeah, I've been going through this, Zach, with a fine tooth comb,
yep,
and when you get up to page 2, E and F,
so what we're talking about, just because we're on TV, we're
well,
on
it's
the.
only discussion.
Yeah, no, we're discussing the solid waste refuge regulation. That's what
Right.
we're on. Okay, so page 2.
Mike, page 2, E and F.
Okay,
Am I out of line if I make suggestions to increase some of the language here?
sure.
I
That's
am
what
out
this
of
is-
line.
No, 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 no. That's
Oh.
that's what this discussion is about.
Well, I think my problem is, I have a real concern with dumpsters with holes in them, rusty, no name seen on it. And I got a feeling that dumpster condition has got to be something that is acceptable. We can't ride around in rotted vehicles. I don't think we should be having dumpsters dumped with a big hole in the front and a big
So-
hole.
So in,
I'm talking about dumpster conditions. If we,
yeah, so in F, we have each dumpster owned, controlled, and serviced by a contractor shall be marked. And with the telephone, all dumpsters shall be, well, this is all about marking, but we can add one after F and replace GH and add an I to all dumpsters shall be maintained to be watertight from the top down.
I like that. I like that because, I mean, might be difficult to be real tight, but a new dumpster, I mean, not a new, a maintained dumpster needs to be clean and not rusty. The other thing that my concern is on dumpsters is on the dumpster, a big name, not these little, you see these little things? That name with that phone number, I think is important to be able to see. And when that gets worn out, they're gonna maintain it.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last thing that my thought is, can we ask a dumpster company how many dumpsters they got?
I mean,
Because-
we can, but
I mean, we don't have to, but could we ask them to put a number on their dumpster? So, like, if we see a dumpster and we call it in and say, hey, dumpster number 10 is eligible, we can't read it. A dumpster number 5, we can't read. Is that something that we can't do? I mean,
I'd have to check if we can make people mark their products.
okay,
As of right now, what it would be is your dumpster at this location needs to be removed because they're all at a specific location.
which is fine,
Which a
but,
lot of dumpsters do have the number on it.
yes,
They're usually in white up on the lip of the front of it.
it's for the contractor himself to know where his dumpsters are.
Yeah.
Basically, but I see a lot of dumpsters that you could hardly read the name, you could hardly read the number, and they got big holes in them.
Yeah. So we
You know?
can,
I mean, and having that information where it can be actually, made, be able to see
yeah,
instantly.
and that's what,
It's pretty important.
that's what F is for.
Yeah.
So that way
I
you
get
can,
that.
shall be conspicuously marked and named
Yep.
with the telephone of the contractor. But I will add that they shall be maintained as watertight from the top down.
Correct.
Because we're not gonna have USDA containers at someone's facility that's completely covered
Yeah.
and watertight. So I can add that to it.
Yeah.
So, some of the main changes that I did make on it are, in the definitions, we have the contractors. Those are the people that maintain, supply for compensation of the dumpsters or removes or transports them. Dumpsters, we added the definition for receptacles or containers that collect, storage, or transport solid waste, refuse, rubbish, offal, and other offensive substances for discard, disposal, or recycling. We did put in the definition of refuse because that has been come up a few times. So what refuge is it includes, this has been approved by town council.
Yep.
It includes garbage, rubbish, or trash, based off of Mass General Law 111, 150A. Refuge means any solid or liquid waste material, including garbage and rubbish, sludge and residual waste, but not including sewage. So under that, I've added garbages, but not limited to decomposable food waste, household waste, and yardage waste. Rubbish is, but not limited to, dry material waste such as glass, paper, cloth, wood, or wasted construction material that's not readily decomposable. 3, trash is limited, but not limited to, rubbish that includes bulky items such as old refrigerators, couches, large tree stumps, electronic waste. So this is all regulated under Mass General Law 31, 31A, and 31B. And the other thing that was changed because of a comment at the last meeting, in the fines, we have the $500 fine, the $1,000 fine, the $5,000 fine for the third offense. In the last regulation, it was quoted that after the third offense, it's a $5,000 fine, you lose your license. But it doesn't say, is that in a 10-year period or anything like that. So I put it in, any subsequent violations after the third offense in the same calendar year shall result in the revocation and suspension of the license for transportation of refuse in the town of Mashpee as determined by the Board of Health. If the license is revoked, the refuge hauler may come to the Board of Health to have their license reinstated the following calendar year. So if they do 4 violations in 1 year, then they would lose their license. The second, that would be 365 days. So if they had their license removed on, say, November, they can come January 1st in front of the board to ask for their license to be reinstated. They cannot get it reinstated for that year that they've had the 4th violation in. So if they have all 4 violations done in January 2024, they have to wait till 2025 to come back to get their license reinstated. They can appeal that, and they can come in front of the board, and the board can make the decision at that time.
Zach, do they need permit, like if they put a dumpster on somebody's property, do they need a permit to do that one?
They are getting a permit to have those dumpsters in the town, yes.
Okay. I've seen a dumpster off of my street, and it has the outhouse attached to it. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
Now, do they need like 2 permits or something? I mean, a permit, don't you need a permit for the?
The septic hauler. Yep.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So there's the waste hauler, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Then there's the septic hauler.
Okay.
So there are 2 permits that
But
they do.
this was
have.
it looked like a one-piece.
Yep, it's a red one, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yep, I know the exact
Okay.
kind that you're talking about.
yeah.
I got a question. If we have the violation out there, do we have a sticker that says you're in violation, call the Board of Health?
No,
This-
we go out there and we get the information and we go call them directly with an email following our call.
Okay, because a lot, I mean, like any other, well, let's say, if there's a violation on a house and they use a sticker for violation,
Yeah.
for some reason, I was just wondering if we had a sticker that says.
No, we don't have a sticker because a lot of the times, you put it on a movable object. The person coming to pick up the dumpster is not really walking around looking at the dumpster, even though they should be checking to make sure that whoever you rented it out to didn't destroy it. But what we do is we go out, we see the violation. Those people are not on site. We don't know when they're gonna come pick it up to even see that sticker.
Okay.
So we go back to the office, we call their office, and we write up an order letter and follow up with an email.
That's why it's so important to have that information on the side of that
Yep.
legible.
Yeah.
I got you.
So it's not many changes, but it is to be more readable
Yeah.
than what it was before with better definitions.
Good. Good, good.
Any other questions on it?
Does anyone have anything else they would like to add to tonight's meeting? Hearing none.
We had enough.
Okay. I'd like to get a motion to adjourn.
Okay, yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I will second it.
Aye.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay.